Fawning can cause us to feel responsible for other people's emotions. When we feel like we have to keep people happy so they won't reject us or they won't be mad at us, then we also may feel responsible for their emotions. Hi, friends. I just want to share with you a little bit about fawning. So this video is on fawning, and I want to put that in a wider context. Fawning is a trauma response. And so what's a trauma response? Well, when we experience danger or when our brain believes we are experiencing danger, then we will react with a trauma response. And those are, and you've probably heard of most of these, it's either fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So with fight, we're going to stand our ground to the threat and we're going to fight it. So think about if you were, caveman and a wild animal was chasing you. If you had a spear, maybe you would stand and you would fight that animal. So fight. Flight is you're going to run away. You're going to try and outrun that animal or that danger or the threat. The next one is freeze. Maybe you're going to play possum and try to become invisible to be safe. So those are the first three trauma responses. And like I said, those are more familiar. But the last one that we're talking about today is called fawning. And fawning is appeasing. We're trying to make the other person happy so they won't harm us. Now, again, does that relate to a wild animal? I don't know. Maybe you could offer them some food or something. But in our life today, I think we probably use fawning more than maybe we use the other ones. And I think also for women, fawning is also used. And another name for fawning is people pleasing. So extreme people pleasing is fawning. So I think people usually have their go-to trauma response. So, we can change depending on the situation, but typically there's kind of a personality trait based on what kind of trauma response you have. So for me, I'm a fawner. I'm a people pleaser, and I think many women are. I think that's a true trait of women. And then let's think about how these trauma responses are used. So if we have a threat in our life or a perceived threat, and that's often what happens. So maybe we've experienced some kind of trauma, and that can be big T or little t traumas. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But we perceive a threat in our life. And so a trauma response is how we respond to that threat. Now, again, it may not be a true threat in the present, but if something reminds us of a trauma that we had in our past, oftentimes it's in our childhood, then we are going to respond with one of these trauma responses. Okay, so now let me just talk a little bit about trauma. Now, oftentimes when we think of trauma, it's like, oh, a person that had a horrible childhood, maybe there was some form of abuse that they experienced in their childhood. There can be other forms of traumas like natural disasters, accidents, different things that happen to us. But when we are talking about trauma, we can also think about either big T traumas or little t traumas. So I think all of us have experienced some form of trauma in our life. I don't think we can get away without experiencing trauma. We can't leave this planet without having experienced some form of trauma. Now, we kind of know what those big T traumas are, but little t traumas are things like, were you bullied in school? Maybe you had a good family, they were very supportive, there wasn't any abuse in your family, but were you bullied at school? And that was a difficult thing for you to handle. Did you have a pretty bad breakup that was really difficult to handle? Friendship, things with friendships, either with boys or with girls when you were a kid, things like that. So there may be things in your childhood and in your adult life too that we don't feel like rise to the level of big T traumas, but these little T traumas can also affect us and they can bring about trauma responses. Now, in saying that, I'm not diminishing the impact of big T traumas. Those are hard, they're horrible things that happen in our lives and especially in the lives of children. But I just want to help you realize that even though you may not have experienced some of those really hard things in your childhood, there still may be things that you did experience that will affect you and will cause these trauma responses in your adult life today. And the rest of this video, I had recorded that earlier, so you'll notice the background is different, but we're going to just really get more deeply into fawning and some of the reasons that we fawn. So I hope this is helpful in understanding yourself and why you may be a people pleaser. All right, thanks. So I'm going to talk about fawning. One of the things with fawning, and this is an extreme form of people pleasing, which can come from childhood abuse or trauma. So one thing that happens in fawning is it causes us to not be seen by others, to kind of become invisible. And this is often a trauma response, and it involves excessive fawning is a trauma response, and it involves excessive people pleasing, appeasement to avoid conflict or to avoid rejection or harm. And as I just said, this often develops as a coping mechanism in childhood when there is childhood abuse or trauma in order to keep ourselves safe. But it can lead to many difficulties in our life, and I'm going to share a few of those here with you right now. Okay, so one of the ways that fawning causes you to not be seen by other people is by suppressing your true feelings and your own needs. So when we fawn, we are likely to prioritize the needs and the desires and the emotions of other people over our own. And this often causes us to hide our true feelings. And then as a result, people don't see the real you, but they only see a version of you that is shaped by your fawning or your desire to please them. So another way that fawning can cause us to not be seen by other people is inconsistent self-expression. Another way to say that is just being who other people want you to be or who we believe that they want us to be. So fawning can cause us to shift our behavior depending on who we're with. And that makes it harder for others to truly know who we are. And this inconsistency can lend lack of deeper connections. So others can't really get a sense of who we authentically are. So we're not really showing up as who we truly are, but we're showing up as who we believe others want us to be. We're fawning. So, whatever the reason, we don't have a conflict, we want them to like us, we want them to not reject us. But what's happening is we're not really showing them who we are. And then that can cause the true authentic self to not be seen by other people. Oh, another reason that fawning may cause us to not be seen by other people is that we neglect our personal boundaries. So when fawning involves overstepping or neglecting our own boundaries to accommodate others. And this can lead to a sense of invisibility. So over time, people come to know you as someone who doesn't have strong opinions or personal needs. And this, again, diminishes your ability to be seen for your true self, for the authentic person that you are. Another reason that fawning or people-pleasing can cause us to not be seen by others is that we can cause us to not be seen by others is fear of rejection. So at its core, fawning is driven by fear. There's a fear of conflict or rejection or abandonment. People will leave us. And this fear can prevent us from expressing vulnerability, and that makes it harder for others to truly connect with us on a deeper level. So again, we're not allowing people to see who we truly are because we're trying to give them what they want so we don't have a conflict or they won't reject us or abandon us. And the last reason for why fawning can cause us to become invisible to other people is it creates one-sided relationships. So fawning can result in relationships where others take advantage of your people-pleasing nature. And these relationships can often become one-sided, where it's all about the other person's needs. Now, this may be because of who the other person is, or it may be because this is how we have taught people to treat us. And so our needs and our desires may go unmet or unseen, but again, that causes the other person to not ever truly know who we are, and that's another reason for this invisibility or this not being able to be seen for who we truly are because of fawning or people-pleasing. So fawning affects our ability to say no because it's rooted in a desire to avoid conflict and to maintain approval from others. And so this pattern makes it difficult to set boundaries and to assert our personal needs. And there are several ways that fawning or people-pleasing makes it difficult for us to say no. And the first one, again, is this fear of rejection or conflict. And you're going to see this throughout this discussion about fawning and people-pleasing. So people who engage in fawning often fear that saying no will lead to rejection, disapproval, or conflict. To avoid these outcomes, they may just agree to things that they don't want to do and, agree to what other people are telling them to do. And this can mean sacrificing their own comfort and boundaries. Another way that fawning makes it difficult for us to say no is that we prioritize the needs of others over our own. So fawning involves consistently putting others' needs and desires and emotions ahead of our own, and saying no requires us to prioritize our own needs and desires. But when we are fawning or people-pleasing, we may not be able to do this. So that's another reason that fawning inhibits our ability to say no. And fawning may also cause us to not even really be able to know what our boundaries are. When fawning, we may lose touch with our own boundaries and struggle to recognize when we need to say no. And when this happens because we've learned to downplay our own comfort or needs in order to please others. So when we have an inability to say no, this can lead us to say yes to too many things. This is another part of fawning or people-pleasing. It turns us into the habit, or it causes us to have the habit of saying yes to things in order to maintain harmony or to avoid upsetting someone. But this habitual people-pleasing can make it so that we almost automatically agree to things that other people want. And again, this causes us to struggle with our own desires and wants and showing up as our unique and authentic self. So low self-esteem can also be a cause of fawning and cause us to not be able to say no to others. Now, it may come from we've been fawning, and so that lowers our self-esteem, our sense of self and worth and value, or it may be that our sense of self has already been diminished. And again, that could be caused from abuse that we suffered in childhood, but that can cause us to be fawning. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. Which came first? Did the low self-esteem lead to the fawning, or did the fawning lead to the low self-esteem? Either way, it's harmful to us. So fawning can stem from a belief that your value comes from being agreeable or helpful. And when we say no or assert ourselves, then that might feel very risky. And we may fear, again, that we're going to be rejected or abandoned, or it's just too risky to be in conflict with someone. So low self-esteem can be another cause of us not being able to say no. So the last reason that fawning inhibits our ability to say no is we may over-accommodate other people. So fawners often feel responsible for other people's emotions and comfort, and so they might say yes even when they don't want to do something, and even when it might be harmful or detrimental to them or burdensome to them. So the desire to make other people happy um, is comes at the priority of our own needs. So we value what other people need over what we need. And again, accommodating other people may make it difficult for us to say no. And that's another result of fawning. Okay, so I just want to conclude this video with a few more points about fawning. So fawning can cause us to feel responsible for other people's emotions. When we feel like we have to keep people happy so they won't reject us or they won't be mad at us, then we also may feel responsible for their emotions, like their sadness or their anger. But the truth is, we are only responsible for ourselves and our own emotions. However, fawning can cause us to believe that we are responsible for other people's emotions. Another way that fawning is used is as a coping mechanism. So when someone is angry with us, when we set boundaries, when we use our voice and speak up for ourselves, that can be pretty uncomfortable. And we may not want to do that. You know, we don't like discomfort. We like pleasure. Our brain moves us towards pleasure and away from pain. But when we need to stand up for ourselves or set a boundary, that can be pretty uncomfortable. And so we may use people pleasing or fawning as a coping mechanism. So what do coping mechanisms do? Well, they help us to reduce our anxiety. And so if we feel like, oh, we should stand up, we should, say what's on our mind, we should set a boundary with someone, but that makes us so uncomfortable, we may fawn to reduce that discomfort and to reduce that anxiety. So it helps us cope with a situation. So it can be a coping mechanism. Another way that we might use fawning is to help us not lose control. And so if we have not stood up for ourselves, sometimes when we advocate for ourselves, we might get angry, and that's okay. We might share our strong emotions, and that's also okay. But if we have been a people pleaser and we just really want to make everyone else happy, then we might fear that if we stand up for ourselves and get angry or share our strong emotions, that we might lose control. Again, if we're not using those gifts, I call them gifts, and strengths of being able to advocate for ourselves, if we don't use them on a regular basis because we're trying to keep everybody else happy, we may fear that using those gifts of standing up for ourselves, of standing our ground, will cause us to lose control, and we may fear that we will become too angry or too emotional, and maybe we've been shamed for being too much of an emotional woman. So a fear of losing control can also be a reason for people pleasing. And the last one that I want to talk about is people pleasing or fawning can cause us to, give up our own values. Because again, the things that are important to us that we believe strongly, if those come up against what other people want, then if we are fawning to keep other people happy, to keep ourselves safe, then we may compromise what we truly believe and our true wants and desires and things that we feel are important. We may compromise those in order to keep the peace, to not have conflicts, to not have people reject us. So compromising our values can be another part of fawning or people pleasing. Okay, friends, thank you so much for watching this video on fawning. I hope you gained some information that can be helpful for you as you, work on people pleasing and fawning. I call myself a recovering people pleaser. I am on this journey with you. But if there was anything that, touched you today or that you would like to know more about, I would be happy to visit with you. I'm a women's empowerment and trauma recovery coach. And so I would be very happy to visit with you to see if we might be a good fit for coaching. Sometimes we just need somebody to guide us on this journey as we're trying to overcome people pleasing or any other thing. I work with women on many topics: self-esteem, self-worth, empowerment, trauma. Now, I don't go deeply into the trauma. Sometimes counseling is better for that, but we touch on the trauma because it does affect our life today, just like we've talked about in this video. So if any of this resonates with you, please look in the description below. I have all the links to my website and Facebook. I would love to visit with you. Okay, friends, just one last thing for today. We covered a lot in this video on fawning, and that's people pleasing, as I said. If you would like to know more, and if you would also like to find out some ways that you can overcome people pleasing, please watch my class on overcoming people pleasing, and I'll have the link for that in the description and also probably on one of the ending slides. So anyway, thank you so much for watching today and have a great day. Bye-bye.